Some argue that whenever, we make humans more productive, that will ultimately remove jobs. That has never been true in history. As we increase the productivity of humans, the cost goes down, the demand increases, which also increases the demand for talent. And that's largely what I think we'll see happen. If you make an engineer 50% more productive, I don't see a case where we're going to have less engineers.
Rejlers Play continues to drill deeper into AI and what it actually means for us, both threats and opportunities. Today you will meet a very exciting person who is passionate about democratizing learning with the help of AI. When Hellermark was 19 years old, he founded Sana, which has been described as kind of a Google for companies. Today, Sana has a lot of world-famous clients. Joel is praised for his ideas internationally, and is not afraid to take up the fight with the big tech giants. So, welcome to Rejlers Play, Joel.
Really excited to be here.
So nice to have you here. Joel, I think you seem to be a very exciting person. You have a very exciting background. You grew up in Japan and Singapore, and it feels like you have always been incredibly curious and thirsty for knowledge. Is that right?
Yeah, I've from a very young age, I got really obsessed with this idea of autodidacticism, that you could just teach yourself anything. So I spent way more time outside of school than in school just teaching myself a range of subjects. I was really obsessed with neuroscience for some time, and then eventually AI.
Yeah. And the years in Japan and Singapore, did that help too, to be a curious person?
I think so. I remember back then when I traveled to Asia, that they were so far ahead. So going into a technology shop there felt like traveling into the future. And I would always come back to Sweden with some device that felt pure science fiction.
Cool gadgets.
Exactly.
Yeah, know what you mean. Do you remember when AI started to interest you, and what grabbed you?
So I started getting into computer science, and it was at the time where a lot of the leading universities started making their top courses public. So Andrew Ng, who was a professor at Stanford, he published his courses in computer science, and one of them was in AI. And it was really interesting, this idea that you could write software once and then it could run while you were sleeping. You could write software that would play chess with your friends on your behalf. And there was these two schools of thought as I started getting more and more into AI. One of them was, how do you automate human intelligence? How do you create systems that can sort of replace it? But then there was this other thought that was, how can we build it to augment human intelligence? And that's what I found the most fascinating. If you could build these tools that would make yourself way more productive or intelligent, then people could use those tools to go and solve the world's most important problems. And that's really what I got very interested in.
Are we talking about 3 or 4, 5 years ago, or is it longer, way back, longer?
So I got into pretty much from the beginning. When I was 13, I got into it and built everything from video recommendation systems to speech recognition and a host of other tools.
And how did that make you feel when you grabbed the thought of all this?
I think, parts of it is existential, and you end up going between, more of the philosophy around these things, which is, what is human intelligence, and will we ever be able to fully replace it? But then I was also so fascinated about how we could use it to solve the world's most pressing problems. It felt like a lot of the problems that we were facing were too nuanced for humans to solve them by themselves. But if we could augment human intelligence, we could go out and solve those problems. And then I got excited about making sure we get there as fast as possible.
And how was Sana born? And how do you see Sana's journey from idea to where you are today?
So it's really around this notion of, could you create a system that could help you learn anything? If you had a system that had all of the world's knowledge, all of your company's knowledge, and all of your knowledge, and then could dynamically teach you any subject that you needed, what would that look like? So that was the genesis to Sana. Founded it back in 2016, which was in some ways early days of AI if you compare it to now. But AI as a field has been around since, the beginning of computer science, and Marvin Minsky and Douglas Engelbart, who were two of my heroes, they were around in the 50s discussing these ideas. But back in 2016, it was less of a discussed subject, and we were really obsessed about how could we apply it to knowledge and learning.
And now we're here, and AI seems to dominate a lot of the conversations today. Ours, of course, also. But Sana has been described as a kind of a Google for companies. Is that a fair description?
I think so. In one way, what we're trying to do is first capture all of the knowledge within your organization. This knowledge can be stuck in people's heads, especially if you think about a company as yours. There's a lot of experts and domain experts that have a lot of knowledge that they haven't shared yet. It can also be siloed across different systems. So how do you first capture and index all of the knowledge that exists? But then how do you make it available? Of course, through search or chat or courses. Then you could make that universally available to all of employees. So much like Google sort of indexed all knowledge on the web and made that universally accessible, how could you do that for a company?
I read a fantastic story about Sana. During the pandemic, over 100,000 nurses and critical care workers were trained and upskilled with the help of Sana's learning platform. That must be on top of your list so far, what you're most proud of.
100%. So during the pandemic, we were in a position where we were seeing everything that was happening. We were speaking to a lot of health systems, and we were extremely keen to support. And we were connected to the president of Mount Sinai in New York. And they were having incredible challenges organizing the knowledge, training the nurses, and they had to quickly upskill their entire staff. We went on to partner with Mount Sinai, with Karolinska Institute, and a host of others to launch then a platform that enabled any critical care worker, any health worker really on the planet to access this curriculum. And the biggest difference there was that it was personalized. Because imagine, if you have two different nurses at the same hospital, no two nurses will start at the same knowledge. So how could you personalize this to them to accelerate the upskilling and make sure that the knowledge sticks? Over time, this ended up being used at over 2,000 hospitals, training over 100,000 health workers. So that was one of these, we speak about learning a lot at Sana being a meta problem. You solve learning, and then you sort of solve everything else because everything starts with learning. If you can empower your engineers or your sales team or the nurses in this case with the knowledge they need in order to do their jobs effectively, you'll see cascade effects in everything that you care about. And I think this was a true testament of that. By advancing how they were learning, we ultimately saw improvements in the quality of the care.
A fantastic story. And you also have a bunch of world-famous clients. Can you drop a few of them?
So one other example I'm really proud of working with is Merck. So imagine you're a researcher at Merck. The amount of knowledge you have to sit through, the amount of research papers you want to search, but you also want to upskill yourself so that you can use data more effectively in your job. So we partner with Merck in training their researchers and really across the company so that they in turn can go and develop medicines faster.
We're talking about really, really big companies here in Sana's sphere. You talk a lot about democratizing learning and access to knowledge. What do you mean by that? And what role can AI play in achieving that?
A big part of it is the personalization of it. And imagine if you're an engineer or if you're in a sales team, depending on your role, there will be fundamentally different knowledge levels and different types of knowledge that you'll want to access. So how can we really personalize this to your role to make it more accessible? The second thing is, how do we capture it? So we can index all of your different systems where knowledge might exist, and then we can match the knowledge that you have in the company with the knowledge that a specific person needs. And that really democratizes the learning process. I think ever since the beginning of computer science, it's been this idea of the next great mind. Will we be able to capture them in a system so that anyone can learn from them? And we're reaching that point now where effectively everyone has a polymath in their pocket. You have a system that has all of the world's knowledge, can effectively solve most knowledge processing tasks that anyone can access 24/7. And I think we're just starting to see the impact of what such technologies will drive.
But is it fair to say, without AI, Sana wouldn't exist?
Sana is very much an AI-first company, and that was really the sort of core of the premise. Was we think that we'll be able to personalize the experience to a whole new extent, and that's ultimately what will enable the type of experience that Sana delivers.
But one thing that comes to my mind is IT security, and that's crucial for companies today.
100%.
How does Sana manage the risk of sensitive information being shared within companies through AI?
And I think this is very much, one of our competitive advantages. We've from day one worked with some of the largest pharma companies in the world, and we've had to architect the platform really as an enterprise-grade product that brings generative AI to the enterprise. What we do when we capture knowledge is we mirror the existing access controls. So you would never have access to something in Sana that you don't already have access to, for example. And then the entire platform is created so that you can manage this at scale.
So the security issue is no problem as you see it?
I think it's really one of our key selling points as well. People are really looking at how can we deploy AI in a safe way, and that's what Sana enables.
Well, you have big dreams, and I love that. But big tech giants want to dominate in AI. Can Sana really compete against the big tech companies?
So historically, what the big companies have been largely focused on is the horizontal use cases, building things like Microsoft Teams and so on. What they very rarely do is go extremely deep into one discipline, such as learning or knowledge that Sana enables. And that's what we're really focused on, going extremely deep into our specific use case. And then we partner with Microsoft, we partner with Google, we have Workday as an investor, for example, and then we partner with them because they want to have the sort of horizontal layer, and then they want tools that solve each individual problems uniquely well. So we connect very seamlessly with Microsoft Teams, for example. But then when you want to learn and access this knowledge, that's what Sana does uniquely well.
So you think you can exist alongside those big tech companies?
For sure. But we also hope to be one of them one day.
Dream big. But Joel, if we talk more about AI in general terms, a lot of people are afraid of what AI might do to us and to the world also. Politicians and even business leaders want to limit research and development when it comes to AI right now. What's your take on that?
I think it's incredibly important that we're very thoughtful and proactive in how we design these systems. I think we've learned historically where we've had to correct things after the fact. And I think there's a lot of cases where I'm concerned with how AI is being deployed. Recommender systems is one of them. I think we set up these recommender systems with very simple what's called objective functions. We just say, make Jesper watch as much video as possible. And this can go very wrong because it can start recommending things that might engage you, but in a destructive way. And that's where we've seen, sort of growth of conspiracy theories as a function of this. So in some ways, I wish we would have been more proactive in those cases. I think it's important that we're very specific in what we want to steer. Steering AI is very tricky because it's such a sort of broad concept.
But is it possible to put the brakes down? In this, when there's a lot of money involved and there's a lot of companies who wants to sell and explore AI, is it really possible then to hit the brakes?
I think there again, you have to be very specific in what are the things that you want to constrain. You're not going to be able to limit the advancements in AI. Those are sort of inevitable at this point. However, if you pick very specific issues, I think there are ways to slow those down.
Should we be afraid?
I think short term, the things I would be afraid of is, for example, recommender systems, things like that. Longer term, I think there are some views that I don't agree with in terms of how these systems will develop. I think one important nuance as well is that the development of AI will probably help us address some of the biggest existential threats.
Yeah.
So if you take climate change, it's a very nuanced problem that would be effectively impossible for us to solve without AI. And so my argument is probably we need to get AI as quickly as possible in order to go after these threats.
Yeah.
Also, if you take the misinformation, of course, there's a risk that AI will create misinformation, but there's also an upside where it can help us address misinformation. Facebook has a massive internal lab only focused on that task of applying AI to identify misinformation, which is a very tricky natural language processing task.
Fight fire with fire.
and most of that is still coming from humans, right?
Yeah.
I think another interesting thing is we're rediscovering a lot of problems as if they were new problems, and we're labeling them now with AI, but most of these problems have been around for years already.
But it's usually said that every person is unique, and I think they are, of course, but can AI really replace all human abilities?
I think it will augment all human. I think what we'll see now is sort of the comeback of the Renaissance person, the polymaths. There are so many things that I'm keen to explore, and there's so many ideas that I would like to execute. But domain knowledge is often holding me back. What we will now get is every single person will have an assistant that can help them solve any sort of problem they direct it towards. And now these systems are, let's say it's 120, 130 IQ systems today. What happens when you have a 10,000 IQ system in your pocket that you can put into solving the problems you're looking at task? I think we'll see people that are able to combine disciplines in whole new ways. We'll see humans being way more productive, and some argue that whenever we make humans more productive, that will ultimately remove jobs. That has never been true in history. What has happened in history is, as we increase the productivity of humans, the cost goes down, the demand increases, which also increases the demand for talent. And that's largely what I think we'll see happen. If you make an engineer 50% more productive, I don't see a case where we're going to have less engineers. But rather will drive down the cost of the production of software, which will likely increase the demand.
But some jobs will disappear, and it will also create new ones.
Yeah, the one risk that I see is that this transition happens faster than we have ever seen in history. We're used to this taking decades. Let's say it happens over years. Then we will need systems to adapt to that.
Yeah.
So I see no risk that humans won't adapt. But it's just a timing question. And there in between, we'll have to have systems that can empower people to reskill.
Let's hope you're right about that. But you told me before we got into the studio here that you have an AI assistant.
Yeah, exactly. So I have.
Is that helpful?
So I use it for scheduling, for example. But today, unfortunately, I had scheduled my day a bit too tight. So I had to jump to Carl Street after this. but that's been scheduling is one of those tasks, right, where it's not fun for anyone.
No, so your AI assistant wants you to be more effective,
and it has a very clear. It knows exactly where I want to have lunch. It knows what times I want to schedule, how long my meetings should be, and effectively coordinates all of them.
I hope we're on time. Joel, if we meet here in, let's say, 5 years tops, where do you think you are then? Is Sana a big company, or have you moved on and invented new companies? Or what do you think?
So I really consider Sana my life's work. We have our company handbook is called The Infinite Game. We don't play for a finite game. We play to keep on playing, and that's really how we've tried to architect the company as well. That everything from how we built the team to how we organize ourselves and so on. It's designed to keep on playing. So I'm positive. I'm still at Sana at that point, and I'm very hopeful that we'll have launched these systems to augment human intelligence and unlock some of that potential. And if we can empower everyone with the knowledge they need to solve their missions effectively, I think we'll see lots of positive cascade effects from that.
Yeah. It was very nice meeting you, and good luck in the future. I'm sure that you will create great things in the future.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you for watching. Joel Hellermark, the founder of Sana, a very exciting person and a very exciting interview. We will be back with more interviews soon. Take care. Bye-bye.